Today I want to try something new. I want to try just doing a vlog, talking about New Age spiritual topics in this particular video. So one of the things that I've been doing is I've been looking at sources. Where have things come from? Like, when did we first have this information written down? And are those sources trustworthy and reliable sources? Can we really use these and say these individuals knew what they were talking about? The reason that this was inspired, it was probably about, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years ago at this point, but I was having a conversation with some individuals on TikTok of all places. And some of the disputes we had on theory and practice within some of the New Age polytheistic movements, this individual kept bringing up sources and referencing, well, where does that come from? And this is where you can find that. And that got me thinking. And I'm like, that's actually a really good point. I have been researching and studying a lot of this stuff when it comes to spirituality and different type of cultural practices and things for many, many years, probably close to 30 years, if not 30 years at this point. Back in the 90s is when I started. And I realized that a lot of the sources that I had was kind of hearsay sources that were inspired by more modern works. I mean, back in the 90s, mid 90s, late 90s, a lot of the available resources, you had to go through like Llewellyn books, where you would go to like Azure Green to find books that were typically Llewellyn books, or you would go to like a gathering, like a pagan gathering or a psychic convention or something along those lines. And in many of those cases, everyone was repeating very similar stuff. Like out of all the books, and I do have a video here on YouTube if you want to check it out to kind of go through my library. I'm going to continue to add to it, but I'm trying to add more historical sources. I love cultural, historical sources when it comes to many things, including spiritual practice, and I find them fascinating. And like many, I was drawn to the idea of an earth-based spirituality, this connection with divinity versus being told it by someone else. The religion I was raised in just didn't click with me personally, so I looked for something else. And I've found a whole bunch of different things from a whole bunch of different authors. But what was the source? What was the origin? How do we know? One of the things that I noticed which became a trend is a lot of individuals who were part of some sort of New Age spirituality or polytheism had a tendency to make outlandish claims that had no historical sources to back it up. They would say things like, these practices survived from the dawn of time, or they would repeat things like, the Christians stole this from us. And I started thinking, like, how true is that? At the time, I was eating it all up and repeating it just like everyone else. But I started looking into it. One of the biggest things that people would complain about is like, oh, well, those sources are Christian sources, so of course they're going to modify them and skew them for their own viewpoint. Okay, but what's your source? Oh, it's just known. Okay, well, why is it just known? How is it that this ancient sort of secret path connects with the ancient past pre-Christian and survived all the way through Christianity moving throughout the world, and you so happen to have access to this super secret knowledge that was passed by word of mouth, but you can't even tell me where you learned it from? I have had the occasional person say they learned it from their parents or grandparents. Okay, at least family practices, that's fine, whatever. But a lot of people try to say, well, they can't share where they learned it from because they have to keep it secret. And if that's the case, if it is true, well, if you can't prove it, that's still hearsay from you. Anyone outside of you, it's hearsay, and they have to trust you as the source. I question how many of those people actually just picked up a book, read the book, and now all of a sudden they're making these outlandish claims of it being ancient and old because these books tell them it is. I wonder about that. So I started digging into it, and I'm starting to pick through pieces. And I could probably make tons of videos on theoretical practice of New Age polytheism and stuff, how it's done based upon all the things that I've seen or read about. But I don't want to go down that path. I don't want to just repeat it for the sake of repeating it. I want to help give resources for two main reasons. One, I would like a conversation. I'm actually starting to get a lot of people interacting in the comments, which are sharing sources back with me. Then I can go read them and make up my own mind of whether or not I feel like that's a trustworthy source and make up my own mind for myself. And I want to empower other people to do the same thing. When I was first getting into this stuff, I was super excited about it, and it was so hard to find anything. And then you started getting these groups of people that also read it, and they would argue over what books they read versus how true it could actually be. Instead of making it and personalizing it for themselves, they would say, no, read this book, and this book is truth. But now that I'm looking into some of these books, I'm starting to wonder how much they really knew. Some people have started to make this easier because with the increase of internet and things that are on there, such as YouTube, such as TikTok, new authors publishing books, we now have more access to content. We have individuals like when it comes to some of the Irish mythologies and myths and things like that, we have Chris Hughes, who I'll link below. Great channel, by the way, great resource. She shares resources. She shares where the books are that she got the information from, which I think we need more of. Then there's Jackson Crawford, if you're into some of the Scandinavian type stuff. And he takes an approach from a purely language approach. He's translating what is written. He's not putting in spirituality. But again, if your spirituality is inspired by culture and sources, it's important to look at those culture and sources. Or we have William R. Short, who also does some of the Scandinavian stuff. There's a lot of different resources out there. Some are easier to find than others, but bringing up actual books that you can pick up yourself and look at, I think, are more important than trusting this hearsay thing. One of the reasons I wanted to bring up this topic today is I've been looking more into the term witch. The two most popular terms that I tend to see on social media, such as TikTok or Facebook or even on YouTube, is people making the claim that they're a witch, that they're a Norse pagan or some variation because there's a lot of term for it. And then on occasion, more often now, sometimes I'll hear the term druid. But mostly it's witch and Norse pagan. Those are the two big ones that I hear about a lot. And witch was huge back in the 90s. So I've been trying to dig into it. And the more I dig into it, I have this whole video on witchcraft that if you want to check those out, I've got a couple videos on it that they talk about the people that started printing books. You know, it goes all the way back to Charles Leland. I think Charles Leland. Let me check my notes. Take notes. Seriously, there's so much out there. It is easy to overlook some of this stuff. I know his name was Leland, but I thought it was Charles. Yeah, it's Charles Leland. But Charles Leland wrote the Book of Aradia, and that's from 1899. That's like one of the oldest sources I can find there. And then you start getting into other people like Margaret Murray or Gerald Gardner and stuff. But with some of the things that they printed and people reprinting that information, the question is, where do they get their sources from? Because if we look at medieval sources, it talks about witchcraft as being evil and bad. We can see in the 15th century that they had laws in England that specifically say the word witchcraft. And then I started having discussions and arguments with people. I like to say discussions. Sometimes they turn into arguments with people on whether it be TikTok or through comments on YouTube. And they'll be like, oh, well, witchcraft is old since the dawn of time and it's pre-Christian. And I'm like, but the term witchcraft itself, written as witchcraft, was 15th century in English law. So what are you referring to as witchcraft? What is your definition of witchcraft? And this has kicked off a whole new direction of research for me. All of these people that are using these words as large umbrella terms, projecting it into the past where that term didn't exist and applying it to anything that they want to put under that term. So this is why I want to go to sources like Britannica.com or some of these old English dictionaries. If this word existed then and this is how people used it, we should respect where it came from. But I also think we need to acknowledge the transition and growth of words. The way witchcraft is used today in the term witch is not the same as it was used in medieval times. And even if you go back to root words that might have inspired it, some of them talk about Old English words like witcha being the root and origin of the term witch, but we don't know a lot about what they did practice-wise. So modern practice can't be traced to there. I've also seen other sources and evidence that suggest a Germanic language. So we're talking Scandinavia, like pre-Scandinavia, right? We're talking about some of these terms that supposedly came out of the Germanic tongues and languages that turned into the word witch, which would then give it a flavor of Scandinavian versus the Anglo-Saxon. But some of the Anglo-Saxon tribes and the Germanic tribes, apparently there were some similarities between their practices anyway. But again, looking at this and finding that history, I think is enriching and inspiring, especially when you're trying to make your path your own. I just find it very difficult to have conversations with people, which is what I want. I want conversations. I want to share what I learned because I like teaching and sharing and talking, but I also want to learn myself. I want to see and hear counterpoints and get engaged into a conversation. Some people don't want to talk about spirituality at all. You know, they want to shut down in their own personal path, or they want to judge others for not doing it the way they see fit. But at the end of the day, what is spirituality if it's not a personal path, if not a personal way of finding growth within yourself and inspiring yourself through life and how to live and how to interact with the world around you? So yeah, this is where my mindset has been, and I thought vlogging about it might be an interesting topic because I'm always looking for making that next video, and I do want to continue to make videos like the last couple that I've done where I basically have AR art generated in the background or just some random photos and I'm just talking. But every so often I feel like I want to vlog. So if you like this approach, if this type of video is inspiring for you and you like this topic or want to hear about similar things, interact with this video. Thumb up, comment below, share your thoughts, and I'll continue to make more. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.